Hello, everybody, whether it's good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, or good very early morning, wherever you are around the world. Thank you so much for joining us for the She Speaks Young Women on Faith, Climate Justice, and Transformational Acts. My name is Claire. I am one of the international vice presidents of Girls Brigade, which, if you don't know, is a movement which is celebrating nearly 129 years of investing in girls in over 50 countries around the world. We've got a large number of people signed up for this webinar, so I'm just going to give people another couple of minutes to log on. But while we wait, I would love to share with you some of the voices of our amazing Girls Brigade members from around the world. We asked them what was their hope for girls, and these are some of the videos, some of the hopes that they shared with us. And it's always great when technology works, isn't it? I'm just going to share my screen again. Hopefully the technology gremlins will not cause too many problems this morning. So here we go.
My hope for girls today is to ensure that girls have access to quality education. Not only that, but to ensure that girls have a clean and safe learning environment.
My hope for girls today is that every girl will be able to profess their religion of their choice and to be able to practice their faith without discrimination, and to grow up in a society where the general welfare is being taken care of.
My hope for girls today is to be able to have a choice instead of being forced into something.
My hope for girls today is that they are empowered through education and the realisation of gender equality. I would love to see a future where girls around the world are encouraged to reach their full potential and supported to make decisions about their future.
My hope for girls today is to ensure that they eradicate poverty in their lives. As we all know, girls are considered inferior to boys, so I would want to see girls hold high positions in the working sector so that they can lead others and not be led.
My hope for girls today is equal rights and opportunities.
My hope for girls today is to see that all girls have access to sanitary pads and are able to attend all classes without worries of messing up their uniforms. I believe if menstrual hygiene is properly managed, it will enable most girls reach their full potential.
My hope for girls today is that we have the confidence to be ourselves regardless of our looks and beliefs.
My hope for girls today is to see a world where girls are treated equally, where girls are educated and empowered because the society has provided an enabling environment for them to thrive. I hope to see a world where girls are not stereotyped because of their marital status. I want to see a world where girls can live life in full.
My hope for girls today is that they'll be able to reach their God-given potential by receiving a good quality education and by removing any barriers that might prevent this, such as child marriage and inadequate menstrual hygiene provisions, in order that they might be able to be empowered to make their own decisions and use their gifts and talents to impact their communities.
My hope for girls today is that they would be able to live in a just society where all people are valued equal, where they will be well educated, not just in academics, but also spiritually and holistically, so they can become hope bringers, generation shapers, and transformers.
Yeah, so yes, I would love to encourage you to share in the chat panel, just as well we wait for a few more people to join online. What is your hope for girls right now? Wherever you are, what is on your heart? What is your hope for girls? So yes, if you've just joined us, you are very welcome. Thank you so much for joining our She Speaks Young Women on Faith, Climate Justice, and Transformational Acts. If you don't know anything about Girls Brigade, please let me just introduce you a little bit to what we do. My name is Claire, and I am one of the international vice presidents of Girls Brigade. I've been a member of Girls Brigade, I'm not going to make you guess how old I am, but for quite a long time. And GB International, we call it GB, is actually one of the world's oldest and largest faith-based movements for girls, and we're now in over 50 countries, and we train and equip our passionate volunteer leaders to mentor and invest in girls from the age of 3 right up to over 18, and we equip them in life skills. We help them discover faith and have a safe space to meet and be mentored by older women. So what does this look like? It looks like community groups in different countries that meet on a weekly basis. It also looks like social enterprise projects in many different countries as well. And I'm really delighted that the team of young women who are going to be speaking today are all Girls Brigade members. So let me introduce you to our Girls Brigade Delegation of Hope. This year we've got Dangi from Papua New Guinea, and Anthea and Jaiza from the Philippines, and we've got Ibanibo from Nigeria, and Christiane and Christi from the British Virgin Islands. You're going to be hearing from all these young women later. They're going to be sharing their perspectives on how climate change and disasters are impacting their own family, their own communities and their countries, and also going to be sharing a little bit about how they advocate for change. But we are delighted to have this panel of young women speaking, because very often those who contribute the least to climate change often suffer the most, and their voices are often excluded. We know that climate justice and climate change are buzzwords in all these international conferences, but very often young women and young women of faith's voices are absent from these platforms. So we're really passionate at the UN Commission on the Status of Women, to give these young women a platform to share, and we really hope that we will all listen and also respond in our words and our thoughts and in our actions. And also at the very end of the call, I'm really delighted that we've also got a panel of experts joining, including the Reverend Rachel Mash from Green Anglicans, Ruth Jacasa, who is a past international president of Girls Brigade, and our current international president, Priscilla Penny. I'm really sorry that Mandy, unfortunately, cannot be with us today, but we're looking forward to this great discussion. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Dangi from Papua New Guinea. Dangi is an agriculturist by profession, and she loves plants, and she also loves working with girls and young women, and she's a representative on Girls Brigade Papua New Guinea's national board, and she currently works for a social enterprise which educates young people on how to destigmatize menstruation, and also how women can also look after themselves as well. So Dangi, it is so good to have you. I'm just going to stop the screen so people can see you. Wonderful to have you with us, Dangi. I've known you for 10 years and you've just grown so much in your confidence and in your leadership, and I'm so glad that your voice is going to be heard today. Now, you come from a beautiful island, Papua New Guinea, and from talking to you, I've learned that actually it consists of over 600 islands, which is incredible, but it also harbours 5% of the world's biodiversity. So you've got one of the world's most diverse biological ecosystems. Can you just tell us a little bit, how is climate change impacting Papua New Guinea? Can you tell us a little bit more, Dangi?
Thank you, Claire. Hi, everyone. So Papua New Guinea is a small island country. We have the mainland, and then you have 600 smaller islands. Now we have about 85% of our population, which are rural dwellers. So our smaller islands, especially the atolls, have been worst hit by king tides. Mostly since December of last year, all throughout to this year. And these are coastal villages along the mainland and the atolls, the islands as well. Most of the cash crops, the gardens have been affected, and most have been relocated to higher grounds. We have also, all throughout the country, we've been feeling the pinch, the effect of the changes in our local weather. In the past, we used to, and just so you know, Papua New Guinea only has 2 types of season, the wet and the dry. So in the past, we used to know when it would rain or when it would be a dry season, and we would plan. But these days, it's all mixed up. We expect rain anytime, and then there's drought for a very long time. I come from a remote part of PNG where it is mountainous, and people depend on their gardens, not as a source of their daily livelihood, but as a source of income as well. And now with what we are facing currently, many crops have died out. People cannot sell to make an income for themselves, which leads to kids not going to school because there's not enough money to send kids to school. And then in most households, because of that, girls are the first to stay home. And this also bridges down to a lot of social economic problems that we're facing, Claire.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Dangi. And I read that, you mentioned some of the impact of climate change on the local communities, and there's one Pacific community in Papua New Guinea that really has been impacted by climate change, so much so that they were deemed the world's first environmental refugees. Do you want to share a little bit more about the people of the Cataract Islands?
Yes, Claire. So the Carteret Islands is made up of 7 atolls. The highest point on the island is just about 1.5 meters above sea level. So you can clearly see how vulnerable they are to the slightest change, to the slightest rise in sea level. Since 1994, they have lost about 50% of their land. The traditional food sources have become scarce. The community also faced severe water shortages due to prolonged droughts, and the sea level rising has also affected their fresh water supply. So in 2005, their plight gained media attention worldwide, and that was when they were named the world's first climate refugees. Most of them have been relocated to the mainland on Bougainville.
Yeah, so this whole population of people have had to leave their homes and uproot their whole life and their way of being and their culture because of the impact of climate change. And I think we all know that they won't be the last people that will, have to do that, Dangi. I know you're really passionate about girls and women's issues. For many of us, probably the majority of us on the call, we've never been to Papua New Guinea. Can you just share a little bit about what's it like to be a girl and a young woman in Papua New Guinea?
Thank you, Claire. So I believe in many countries in the world, we all face issues as girls and young women. Mostly in Papua New Guinea, we have the 3 that I would like to shed light on that most girls and women face. Firstly, gender equality. I come from a country where most parts of it is patrilineal, the patrilineal society where male are predominantly the head of the family, the household community. So they make most of the decisions and women tend to take the back seat. For example, currently, Papua New Guinea does not have any female members or representatives in our parliament.
Wow.
Secondly, yes, so you can see how limiting it is for women and girls' voices to be heard.
Wow.
Secondly, girls face a lot of violence against women and gender-based violence in general. And thirdly, lack of empowerment through education opportunities.
Yeah, Dangi, one of the things that we're discussing it through this webinar, I know that they're also focusing on it in the UN sessions, is how does climate change impact girls and young women uniquely? So you've just described what it's like to be a girl and young woman in Papua New Guinea and some of the really big challenges that girls and women face. How does the effects of climate change make that even more challenging? Does it make it more challenging?
Yes, Claire. So women and girls, they play a pivotal role within our families. And as I've mentioned, in my country, we are more patrilineal, so women take the more household and community duties as stewards of the household. And women are mostly dependent on when it comes to sourcing for water, land cultivation, tending to the sick, and home duties, I should say. So with the impacts of climate change, women and girls now are put under the strain to work harder to meet the expectations and basically to ensure that their households and their communities, their expectations are met. Yes.
Yeah. And you mentioned, it's so hard to believe, isn't it? I didn't know that Papua New Guinea had no female parliamentarians. And you've never had that in your history, Dangi, is that right? Never even in history?
that we've had in the past, but not
right now.
many women, just like 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, so not right now. And like, you know, we want to also focus on some of the solutions to climate change and the impact. You know, what do you think? Do you think obviously promoting more women in leadership, empowering them in leadership, do you think that is, you know, a good solution? What are some of the other solutions that you would like to advocate for?
Yes, so Claire, definitely women's roles in management of household should not be seen as a weakness, but it should be seen as a strength. And for women to be more involved in coming up with mitigation policies.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Stangy. And you know, it's great to see people comment and saying it's great to hear young women's voices, you know, on this topic. And it is a very buzzword, climate change, and we've had the COP conference and it's always in the news. I just would love to hear from your perspective as a young woman from a small island nation like Papua New Guinea. Do you feel that young women's voices are really heard within these debates and within these discussions?
So in the recent COP, many small island nations were present, but I believe that young women and girls' voices were not amplified enough. We need to look closely at how women and girls are affected, because when it comes to climate change and its effects, it affects the gender roles differently. And we need to come up with specific ways to limit and to assist women and girls. So there should be more participation from women and girls in government, and the government agencies should be working more closely with organizations such as Girls Brigade so that girls and women's voices are heard.
Great, thank you, Dangy. It's great that your voice is being heard right now, and I can see the comments. You know, people are cheering you on and are being enlightened by what you're sharing. And I would love to hear, you know, there is obviously we need to advocate for policy changes within governments, but actually each of us, you know, we have individual responsibilities, don't we? And I just would love to hear from you. You know, I know that you're an agriculturist, you've been involved in a number of initiatives promoting environmental care and sustainability within your community in PNG. Would you like to share a little bit more about some of the initiatives that you've been part of?
Sure, Claire. So I was part of a team of young people who went out to a local community, a coastal community. We helped them to do a beach cleanup, and then we demonstrated and showed them how to do a waste audit, sorting out their waste, and basically showing them how to emphasizing on the 3 R's: the recycling, reusing, and reducing of waste. Also, I currently work for a local social enterprise in the space of menstrual health and hygiene, where we produce reusable sanitary cloth pads and also bring awareness on menstrual health and hygiene. But I would like to focus more on those pads being more environmentally friendly. And I'd like to think that in our small way, we help to reduce the waste that is given off to the environment. Yep.
Great, Dangy. And, you know, very often, you know, when Girls Brigade became a member of the UN a couple of years ago, our dream and our vision very much was to have more faith-based voices amplified, you know, in these types of discussions. And very often faith-based organizations can be marginalized, you know, within these discussions. And I would love to hear from you. Why do you think faith-based organizations like Girls Brigade and other movements and even churches, why do you think they have an important role to play in pursuing climate justice?
Okay, so you see, organizations such as the Girls Brigade and churches, they can be found in many marginalized communities around the world. Take, for example, in PNG, where NGOs and churches are in the forefront of bringing service delivery to the local communities compared to the government. And these they bring out women empowerment programs which enable women and youth, young girls, to recognize that their views matter and what they have to say is valued, and they have they're able to
Oh, Dangy, you're just
play
breaking
a
up a little
more
bit.
meaningful role within the community.
Great, Dangy. Sorry, that just broke up a little bit, but I really want to ask you this last question. You know, as somebody from a nation,
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes. I'm hoping the internet lasts for the one last question. That as somebody from a Western industrialized nation, I'm zooming in from the United Kingdom, from Northern Ireland. You know, my nation probably is one of the biggest contributors to climate change. You know, your nation doesn't contribute, but Papua New Guinea, as we've heard, is devastatingly impacted by climate change. We've just heard about communities having to leave their homelands and move to a different island, uproot their whole life. You know, what would you say to people that are listening, individual people that are listening, that are maybe very complacent about even how their individual actions can contribute to climate change? What would you like to say to them right now?
Thank you, Claire. So in parting, I would like you all to come with me on a tropical island getaway. Now, take yourself out of where you are, the hustle, the bustle of the big cities. Come with me to where the grass is greener, the cool island breeze blows as the coconut trees gently sway to welcome you. The turquoise water is warm, the white sandy beaches stretches for miles and miles. So we leave the coastline and we head up inland where the air is fresh. You're on an island now that gives you an abundance of food from both the land and the sea, fruits of every kind readily available, fresh water to drink. You go to sleep at night listening to the soft cry of insects. You are awakened in the morning by the sweet melodies of birds. You live on this island, you call it home, and you don't see yourself living at all. Then one morning you wake up and you notice that the shoreline has decreased. Water has come in due to high sea levels. Weeks later, there is no more crying of insects at night, no sweet singing from birds in the morning. The island now is the birds have migrated. The trees that gave you full you went to get fresh water from now taste like seawater. Creeks have dried up due to long droughts. There is less fish in the ocean to catch. The days become long and hot, and at nights you lay restless as you hear the waves crashing in, eroding the shoreline, and you realize that your island home is now being consumed slowly into the great ocean. You realize that the only way to survive is to find somewhere else to call home. This is our reality. And you out there, you have the power to cause change, to influence policymakers, to advocate, to create awareness where you are, that smaller island countries like Papua New Guinea now live in this harsh reality. Please help change the cost of our reality and the reality of our generations to come. Thank you. Thank you, Claire.
Yeah, and thank you, Dangy. Thank you for painting that really, really vivid picture of what the reality is, you know, every day for you and other people in your community. So thank you so much, Dangy. And I just would love to invite people to just reflect on for a couple of seconds of what you've heard from Dangy in Papua New Guinea. She communicated so vividly about how climate change and the effects of it are devastating parts of the island and parts of people's lives, and unfortunately with all the predictions it's only going to get, you know, worse. So please just reflect on something that you've learned or something that you've heard from Dangy that struck a chord, and I would really invite you to write that in the chat function. So thanks so much, Dangy, and we're going to move from Papua New Guinea, from one island to the other side of the world. We're going to move to the Caribbean, to the British Virgin Islands. So I'm so delighted to introduce you to Christy and Christiane Roberts, both of them from the British Virgin Islands. Let me introduce you to Christiane. She's a 21-year-old student, and she's inspired by her passion for STEM. She's a volunteer mentor at local high school. She's a STEM tutor, and she's also the website developer and administrator of her local Girls Brigade company in the BVI. And Christy is her 17-year-old younger sister who's also a student who enjoys science, cooking, baking and debating, and being a part of discussions concerning the future of her community and the world. It's really wonderful to have both of them. And Christy I is one of our youngest panelists at 17 years old. So I'm so excited to hear, you know, what she is going to share. So we went to another tropical island, the British Virgin Islands. Both Christiane and Christy I are from Tortola. I think where many of us think about the Caribbean islands, we think about the beautiful, idyllic, sandy beaches, but actually these islands are very much at risk. The British Virgin Islands have experienced 11 hurricanes since 1989, and most recently experienced in 2017, there were 2 Category 5. That's the highest, strongest category of hurricanes, and they were called Irma and Maria, and unfortunately they caused catastrophic impact, including deaths on the island. So Christy I, you were actually on the island of Tortola when the hurricanes struck, and you were 13 years old at the time. Can you just tell us a little bit about what was that experience like?
Of course. So yes, at the times of Hurricane Irma and Maria, I was at home in Tortola in British Virgin Islands, and I had never experienced a hurricane before, so I had no idea what to expect. And the day of Hurricane Irma started off with slightly normal storm conditions. So it was rainy, it was windy, and it was dark. And I remember that I had just returned to school the day before from summer vacation. And I naively thought that the day after the hurricane that we would be back at school. So my brother and I, we were packed and ready to go. Little did I know that we wouldn't be back to school for about 2 months. I remember being covered under the blanket with my younger brother, sandwiched between my father and I, and my grandmother huddled under the blanket on my brother's bed. We stayed there until the eye of the storm passed, and during the calm, we went out to inspect the damage that Irma had caused. The shattered glass and the floodwaters and the debris had become my new reality. Yeah. I remember pulling my grandmother back inside of the house as she cried out for my great-grandmother, her mother, as the tail of the storm came to finish the demolition. After 36 hours of what felt like forever, everything I once knew was destroyed. The life I knew yesterday was no more.
Mm-hmm. And Christy, we're so glad that we can communicate that that was an absolutely terrifying experience, but none of your family, you know, lost their life. But obviously going through an experience like that is, you know, traumatic in many senses of the word. And you just described what it was like in the middle of Hurricane Irma. But as you've hinted, you know, when a hurricane passes, when a Category 5 hurricane passes through a community, it leaves an aftermath for weeks and months. And you just said that you didn't go to school for 2 months. How else did that hurricane impact your community?
Well, after Hurricane Irma, my life was completely different. I couldn't get into contact with my friends, and I couldn't get into contact with my family who were overseas at the time. I was out of school for about 2 months, like I said, because my school had also been impacted. My grandparents' house, where I had all my fondest memories, was just completely destroyed. My community was in shambles. Many houses were destroyed. I remember the day after the hurricane seeing people with garbage bags of their belongings looking for a place to stay, even just for the night. There was no church, there was no organization of any kind. Everyone had been impacted, and everyone was just completely discombobulated.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that hurricanes are natural disasters that do occur through the centuries, but research has shown that the strength of hurricanes, the increasing strength, is related, you know, to climate change. And Christiane, you weren't in Tortola because you were actually outside the country to study. And, you know, how did that feel? Like, this was your first time away, you know, from your family. This awful hurricane devastated your community. How did that feel to not be able to contact them and not to know what was happening?
In one word, the experience was really terrifying. In my entire lifetime, I have never witnessed a hurricane like that of Irma or Maria. So naturally, I could not imagine the extent of damage that was possible when I heard that a Category 5 hurricane was making its way to the British Virgin Islands. I thought it was just some more wind and rain and I wasn't really that worried about anything. But when I lost contact with my family, it was kind of like a big uh-oh moment. It was quite terrifying not being able to call any of my family members and have them pick up. Actually, the day of the Hurricane Irma, I just started school in a new place, around new people, in a new environment. And I had planned to be focused on getting acquainted with everything and everyone. But instead, I was spending most of my energy pretending to pay attention to the things I had to and pretending to be all right. Few of my classmates that I spoke to were encouraging and very supportive, which was very, very kind of them. But even then, I just wanted anyone really, to pick up the phone and to tell me that they were all right. It didn't help that I saw so many pictures beginning to emerge from the Virgin Islands, and all I saw was massive destruction island-wide. Then I started seeing pictures of my district on social media, even before I could get in contact with my family members. And then I saw the picture of my grandparents' home completely destroyed. So as you can imagine, I fared for the worst. So overall, it was really emotionally taxing, mentally taxing, but not because of the hurricane that happened. It was really more so because of the period of time being without contact, being without information, and simply not knowing what was going on from so many miles away.
Yeah, and we've been talking a little bit about the hurricanes and how they impact, the British Virgin Islands and other islands in the Caribbean. But could you share a little bit more, Christiane, just about, in general, how is climate change impacting the Caribbean islands?
As for my family and I would say that hurricanes showed us just how serious climate change is and how we can be affected, especially since we live on a tiny dot on the map. And as for the Caribbean, I believe that the climate change has proven itself to be very, very detrimental to the bread and butter of some of the islands. The Caribbean, as you may know, is a popular vacation destination for many. And as a result, there is a lot of time and money and effort put into marketing these destinations to the world to boost tourism and to sustain tourism as an economic pillar. In the BVI especially, financial services is also another economic pillar, and natural disasters threaten all of these economic pillars alike. After a natural disaster, the economic pillars are affected during that period of recovery. And during this time, the families of taxi drivers, tour operators, hotel workers, resort workers, financial services providers, and all people who depend on the profits of tourism and the financial services are affected.
Yeah, very often within the United Kingdom, we might hear that there's a hurricane in the Caribbean. Maybe we see a picture for like 10 seconds on the news, but what you're contributed now really helps us understand that actually this is not just an incident that happens for one day. This leaves an impact for weeks and months, within communities. So thank you for sharing that, Christiane. And Christiane, like I said, I'm so excited. We are so excited at Girls Brigade. You're one of our youngest panelists, and we really believe that your voice needs to be heard. I would love to give you the opportunity to share with everybody. You are a Christian. How does your Christian faith impact your perspective on climate change and looking after God's creation?
Well, as to my perspective on climate change, my Christian faith motivates me by always reminding me that God has given us dominion over the earth. And to me, that means that He trusts us enough with His creations to take care of them and rather than destroy them.
Yeah. And Christiane, like I said with Dangi earlier, do you think faith-based organizations like Girls Brigade, like churches, do you think we really do have an important role to play in pursuing climate justice? I'm very aware that there's lots of faith leaders here on this webinar. There's lots of Girls Brigade leaders. What is the important role that we can play?
Yes, definitely. They can present the issue of climate justice as a biblical responsibility, which would be a new approach to convince parliamentarians to make legislations regarding climate justice. Also, these organizations can educate persons about their responsibility assigned by God to care for the planet. As faith-based organizations, we do have a responsibility to share the word of God and his teachings with others so that they too may live their lives according to what is righteous in God's sight. This includes things like his teachings about climate care and caring for our environment. So it is important that churches and other faith-based organizations like the Girls Brigade stay included in these discussions of climate care and take responsibility of helping other people become aware of their God-given task of caring for our environment.
Yeah, absolutely, Christiane. I'm so glad that through different programs within Girls Brigade, I know that is happening around the world, that Girls Brigade leaders are using programs to educate the next generation to look after God's creation. And Christiane, like I said before, you know, our individual actions matter within this debate. It's not just the responsibility of governments, it is us as well. What would you say to us for people that have maybe never seen the real impact of climate change or natural disasters, who are just complacent about even recycling, you know, material, you know, I don't see any need to petition our government to change their policies? What would you say to us if we're feeling complacent right now?
I would say to them that climate change affects us all, even if it is not to the same extent. As small island nations, we often deal with the bad end of the stick because we are prone to conditions that favor natural disasters, such as hurricanes. I highly doubt that the carbon footprint and daily activities of small island nations, such as those in the Caribbean, would be enough to drive substantial changes in climate that lead to the development of these monstrous disasters and weather systems that completely destroy communities and disrupt lives. So to persons who are complacent or not mindful about how their everyday activities may impact other lives, I would say to them that it is crucial that the discussion of climate care and climate justice and climate responsibility and care for our environment be taken with the utmost seriousness. In essence, I would remind them that the lives and the livelihoods are at stake when it comes to climate care, lives and livelihoods that are just as important as their own.
What a challenge and what a reminder, Christiane, that lives and livelihoods, not only in the Caribbean, but actually in communities around the world, we heard from Papua New Guinea as well, you know, is at stake. And Christiane, as our youngest panelist today, we want to give you the last word here. You know, it is our hope and prayer and our dream that one day a Girls Brigade member will be part of the government delegation, you know, that goes to the United Nations as part of the negotiations on the recommendations and the written statements that go on. And Christy, I want you to imagine that you are part of that delegation right now and you have that opportunity to speak words to governments to change policies. What would you say, Christy, if you had that opportunity?
Well, my message to such world leaders that value economic gain over their community would be this. You should not exchange wealth and material possessions and things of convenience for the God-given gifts of lives and livelihoods and the
Oh gosh, I'm just going to stop you.
To help sustain these, to do better.
Thank you, Christy. Unfortunately, the internet just kind of went there. Can you repeat what you said again? So I do want people to hear you.
Of course. So as I was saying, I would tell world leaders that they should not exchange wealth and material possessions for things of convenience, and things of convenience for the God-given gifts of lives and livelihoods and the natural environment that God has given us to sustain these for future generations to come. So in other words, my message would be to them to do better.
And I think your message to all of us that's listening as well is that we can do better individually as well as GB as well as churches. Thank you so much, Christiane. Thank you so much, Christy. As somebody just wrote in the comments, definitely you will be part of future delegations from the British Virgin Islands. We're so grateful that we have young women like both of you and Dangi within Girls Brigade and all of our GB leaders. So thank you so much. And as I would say to everybody listening, I know it's hard listening on a webinar when you can't interact, you can't see people in person, but I would love you to just to share a little bit about what you received from what Christy and Christiane said, maybe something that struck you that you didn't know about. Maybe you want to send them a message of encouragement. As you can imagine, it's quite intimidating to come on and lead a UN CSW workshop, but these young women are absolutely smashing it and we're so proud of them. So please encourage them, but please also share what you've learned from them. So thank you so much, Christiane and Christy. And we're going to go now from the Virgin Islands, talking about Category 5 hurricanes to the other, back to the other side of the world, to Asia, to the Philippines. And we're going to speak to Jiza and Anthea, and let me just introduce you to both of them. Jiza is a professional teacher, a leader and a mentor who uses her platform to raise awareness on climate justice and environmental protection. She's also a passionate young leader of her local church, where she inspires young people to learn, live and lead like Jesus. And Anthea is her colleague. She's also a professional elementary teacher. She's a hobbyist nature photographer and a filmmaker. She's also a disaster emergency responder of the Philippine Red Cross, and she also is a leader in the Boys and Girls Brigade of Philippines, just like Jiza is. Thank you so much for joining us, for both of you. And you know, we just heard from Christy and Christiane about the effects of Category 5 hurricanes within the BVI. Now, you are also part of an island nation. The Philippines has over 7,000 islands, and you also have an average of 20 major storms or cyclones a year. So you live in a nation where you expect to actually have 20 major storms a year. Jiza, can you just share a little bit, you know, what is it like to live in a country that is so prone to such extreme weather events and natural disasters?
Thank you so much, Claire, and good day, everyone. Fear and trauma are the strongest words that would describe my feelings every time our country is hit by typhoons or any other natural calamities. So yearly, our country experiences natural catastrophes, which cause so much terrors to us Filipinos. So we have to deal with constant threats and that might even hurt or kill our loved ones. But despite this, we Filipinos, we always stand boldly with our heads held high, for we believe that there's always hope along the way. And further, our spirit and faith is our greatest defense in whatever calamity or any other disasters may come in our way.
Yeah, Jazzy, you know, from speaking to you over the last couple of months as we've been preparing for this webinar, I can definitely see the resilience in you and the strength in you and your faith, you know, through some of the events that you have encountered. And Anthea, in 2013, Cyclone Haiyan hit, you know, the Philippines, and it was the strongest cyclone to ever hit landfall that time, and it was the deadliest one within your history. I mean, I can't imagine enduring 300 kilometers an hour winds, and this cyclone affected over 14 million people in 46 provinces. You were obviously there at the time where Cyclone Haiyan hit. Can you just, you know, for most of us on this call, we've never experienced anything like that. Can you just share a little bit about what is it like?
You know, Claire, it was really an unimaginable experience that no one or even me would want to be in that situation again. We were actually caught off guard, and we never expected that how strong the typhoon was. As far as I could remember, during that time, the weather was very calm. It was sunny, and we never expected that the typhoon would be that strong. We were just in shock, actually, when the typhoon made a landfall. I witnessed how violent and ravaging the wind was. I could hear the wind howling and damaging houses. And the rain that time was also pouring really hard and caused flooding to communities. And people are being trapped on their houses. Some of them are soaking wet, crying out and shouting for help. And imagine the houses that are being wiped out, being destroyed, trees being uprooted, electric posts that being um, destroyed. And, you know, there were actually 10 commercial vessels that were washed inland because of the storm surge. It was that strong. And the typhoon really left a great damage to our community.
And thank you. I'm just showing on the screen some photographs. I know that they come from a local newspaper, the Inquirer. They're not photographs from Cyclone Haiyan. I think they're from Cyclone Odette, but they do share a little bit about what the devastation is. And Thea, your family has a farm. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the cyclones affect your family and its farming livelihood?
You know, Claire, having a farm in a tropical country where we experience natural calamities happen is not an easy deal. Farmers and the people in the community are directly affected by changing of temperatures and, of course, flooding. We experience longer drought periods, scorching hot weather, water scarcity, and because of that, we get less harvest and, of course, income. Another is because of change of the rain patterns, our rice fields and our plantations would get flooded, and it affects our financial stability. Also, because of that, prices of crops gets or high, or the prices increases, and also it becomes a burden to our community, especially to the poor families. And, you know, we will keep experiencing this impact if we don't take action now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then we're going to come on to some of the actions that we can take in a minute. But Jaisa, could you just maybe share a little bit? We heard from Christiane about the aftermath of a hurricane in their island. You know, what's the aftermath of a cyclone onto the communities in the Philippines?
So that time there was a sudden or a major shift after that fateful typhoon experience. And the only hope Filipinos held until the time was the support or aid and help coming from the local and national NGOs, the private organizations from all parts of the world. And the aftermath was really the hardest part of a typhoon. It's because people lost their properties and even their loved ones. And recently we experienced this typhoon last December 2021. It's the typhoon Odette, and it was in the southern part of the Philippines that hit that typhoon, and we have to rebuild everything. We lost our infrastructures, our houses, and even our but we believe that we are not alone, and we Filipinos, we are very resilient, and we have strong faith in God. And though there's pain every time we think of that devastating typhoon or devastating moment in our lives, we always believe that life must and should go on.
Yeah, and guys, just when you mentioned about Odette, actually, just last night, one of our international vice presidents for Asia, you know, Mrs. Tay Poem, you know, shared an email about how Odette has impacted the GBBB companies. You know, it has absolutely devastated many people's venues, like they can't meet, you know, or they've lost equipment. So this is a couple of months on, like this happened in December and we are still in March. So you can see the devastating aftermath, you know, lasts for months, you know, after the actual event. So, I mean, Jaisa, you're being given this platform today. You know, we want to see more young women's voices as part of these discussions. Do you think young women's voices are amplified enough in the climate change debate? We'd love to hear your views.
I feel that young women's voices should be amplified and heard in this discussion. First and foremost, we as a small island nation, we are contributing very least of carbon footprint, and yet we are greatly affected by climate change. An example of this are strong typhoons we experience every year, like what you've mentioned, we experience over 20 typhoons every year. And this is caused by the first world countries that emits or contribute a greater amount of carbon footprint. And as we raise awareness about the sensitive yet important topics, we as a youth, we hope to inspire to make a stand. And even that's why it is very essential for us young women who is very passionate about this climate change that we should make a stand and make or create a mark. So that we could live, because this is the only way that we could live a better or a betterment of a place we live in.
Yeah, and Thea, you know, we're obviously promoting the idea that having more women in leadership is also part of the solution to climate change. But what other solutions do you have? I know that you're a solution-focused person, you're an educator of children. I know that this is the way your mind is wired. We'd love to hear a little bit about your thinking on this.
Claire, you know, some people think or feel that climate change is not relatable because it didn't happen to them. But it's real. It is happening already, and we are already experiencing its results. For me, we should not have band-aid solutions problems, but we should have permanent actions to fight climate change. And it should start at home. Our irresponsible and insensible practices and actions, and we should live a life of sustainability. We should also continue to instill to children, to youth, and everybody in the community about the importance of environment protection and preservation. The Earth's resources are not infinite, and we know that the population just keep on increasing. And also, I believe that empowering women, more women in leadership is part of the solution. According to climate change organization Project Drawdown, women empowerment is key to reducing climate change. And also, one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals include gender equality and giving women the access to education, family planning, healthcare, allowing women to practice their rights and be able to speak out their opinions and be given equal opportunities to any profession or any job. Women, you know, also has the power to change the world.
Yeah, amazing advocacy there, Anthea. And Jiza, I know that you practice what you preach, you know, as an educator, as a teacher, as a leader of young people. What are some of the individual actions that you do to look after God's creation?
As a teacher, I believe that through leading an example, one can achieve a sustainable environment. And I always uphold my core belief that educating children at home and even at school be a top priority in order to eradicate environmental problems and issues, such as the proper waste disposal, segregating of waste, and the applications of 3 Rs, which is reduce, reuse, and recycle. So I also support the tourism and local products. And according to science, one-way flight could create or could produce a harmful emissions in the air. So avoiding unnecessary travel abroad can decrease the carbon footprint. And at home, we Filipinos, we are very resourceful. When we do our laundry, we use it to water the plants. And when we go, and in my daily habits, I opted to use metal straws in replacement of plastic straws.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jiza. I know that in our discussions, I think it was you that said to me in one of our calls that it's you know, it's countries that contribute the least to the climate change that are worst affected. And Anthea, I just want to give you the last word in this conversation. You know, once again, you have challenged us through your words and your experiences, but if anybody is just feeling complacent or just not mindful about their actions, you know, what would you say to us to kind of wake us out of that?
The Philippines is highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and we are already experiencing its results. Imagine those families who mourn the tragic death of their loved ones because of these typhoons. You know, people lost their shelters, their livelihoods, and they are starting their lives all over again because of this disaster. And our insensible actions that contribute to climate change, it doesn't only affect my future, it affects your future and everybody's future. What will you do? Will you keep a blind eye to what is happening now? This is already an existential threat. This might not be happening to you right now, but it will soonest if we don't act now. And this might sound a cliche. If not us, then who? If then when? If not here, then where? No single country can solve this alone. It requires cooperation among all countries all over the world. I need your help. We need your help. And the world needs our help. I call everyone to take action for a healthy, sustainable, and gender equal world. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Anthea, and thank you, Jiza. What a challenge that you're calling us. You know, you're calling each of us. There's over 150 people on this call, and there's going to be many more people watching this webinar when we upload it online as well. So thank you for the reminder that our actions matter, and actually we need to petition governments, but we need to also change our actions. If we're youth leaders, if we're working in GB and other organisations, we need to make sure that creation care, you know, is part of our programme, and we're instilling that in the next generation. So thank you so much for both of you. And if you're listening on the webinar, please do share a little bit about what struck you from what Jiza and Anthea said. Do you have any ideas, any other contributions that you want to make within it? But we're so grateful for both of your examples as well. And we pray that one day you'll be on the Filipino delegation to the UN CSW as well, and your voices will be heard there as well. But thank you so much. And I'm so delighted then to welcome our last member of our Girls Brigade Delegation of Hope, and that is Ivan Patrick from Nigeria. I'm delighted to introduce that Ivan studied mass communication. She is a junior high teacher, and she's also a humanitarian that volunteers with an NGO that works with people with disability. She's really passionate about exploring how faith intersects with social change. She's one of our incredible advocates, and Girls Brigade has really given her opportunities to develop her leadership skills, and she served as the Girls Brigade Nigeria Youth Secretary, and just a couple of weeks ago she's been elected into a senior role as the PR officer. So Ivan, it's so great to have you with us, and you bring a perspective from a different nation. We've had three quite small island nations, or the contributors from three island nations, but Nigeria actually is one of the countries that actually contributes to climate change, and there's a lot of different issues that we could talk about. We could talk about the deforestation that's happening, but what we're going to focus on is the kind of effects of the fact that Nigeria is now one of Africa's biggest oil producers, and this has led to this prevalence of black soot, which we're going to talk a little bit about at the minute. But just to put in perspective for everybody, this idea of black soot is one of the deadliest agents of air pollution according to the EPA, and globally Nigeria ranks 4th for air pollution, you know, within Africa. That's deemed by the United Nations, and 94% of the country's population is exposed to air pollution levels that is higher than the WHO kind of guidelines. So can you just explain, a lot of us don't have any idea what black soot is. What is it, and you know, how has it impacted you, Ivan?
Thank you, Claire, for the question, and good day, everyone. When you hear black soot, what comes to your mind? Imagine yourself on the day of a long-awaited public speaking presentation. You're dressed in your well-ironed white and sky blue outfits. Your presentation is for 9 a.m. and you've left your house around 8 a.m. anxious, eager, and happy. You arrive at the venue and the security guard walks up to you with a string question and he says, did you sit on a dirty seat in the bus body or did you fall on the ground? In wonderment of his questions, you turn to look around. Boom, there you go. You're being stained by a dust-like particle, which is likened to be the stained black suit. Can you imagine the anger? Can you imagine the frustration you're bound to experience at that moment? Well, that mixed emotion has been within me since 2016 in the southeastern city of Port Harcourt. Elsewise, due to the air pollution, it has caused me coughing, it has caused me chest tightness, and again, it has worsened my asthma. This black suit is a respecter. I repeat, this black suit is a respecter of no man because both the small, the big, the rich, and the poor suffer from it.
Yeah. Thanks so much. I believe we've got a picture of your friend, you know, holding up her hand, just showing what, that's just her been walking about for a while outside, and that's what she's been covered in. It just seems to cover everything. And you know, we're going to go on to talk about how climate change and gender justice intersects, but I would love to give you an opportunity, like I did particularly with dengue in Papua New Guinea. What is it like for girls and young women in Nigeria? Just share a little bit about your experience.
It is like being a strong woman, being strong spiritually, strong socially, strong at home, strong at work. It means breaking barriers. But there are certain challenges being faced by every young girl and woman in Nigeria. And those challenges include gender-based violence. It will interest you to know that in times of climate change, girls and women are being exposed to physical and sexual violence. 1 in every 3 girls in Nigeria has experienced physical and sexual violence. And this is as a result of climate change. What about education? Girls are being deprived from going to school, not because they don't want to go to school, but because there is no resources to send them to school. The effects of climate change.
I love what you said at the beginning, Ivan, that being from Nigeria means that you are a strong woman. And I get that impression that you're a strong woman because you are breaking through so many barriers, some of them that you mentioned there today, particularly gender-based violence or male violence against women. So how, you know, you've mentioned some of the challenges that are facing girls and women. When we bring in climate change and the impact of climate change, does that make it even more challenging to be a girl and a woman in Nigeria? What's your thoughts?
Yeah. Yes, it does. You know, the inequalities and discrimination faced by every marginalized girls and women in Nigeria is as a result of climate change. And those things are child marriage, we have flood, we have droughts, we have fewer opportunities to work. Let me talk about this child marriage. When there is climate change, what happens? In a family where they do not have the resources to cater for the needs of the children, they send out these little girls out in hands of marriage because in return, they're going to get materials, they're going to get food, they're going to get money to fend for the other children. So this girl, it's more like paying the price for the family. She has a life. She has said to herself, in time to come, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a doctor. But her life is being cut short because she has to pay for the price of her family. Because there is no money. What about fewer opportunities to work? It will interest you to know that virtually all the girls from the rural communities, their livelihood are being linked to these natural resources. So due to the consequences of climate change, they are not opportune to work anymore. Let's take a look at the farmers. How do you expect them to get farm produce when there is climate change? How do you expect them to get water when there is a shortage of water? You see, these are the things that girls faces. Let me talk about flood. Flood is one of the common effects of climate change in Nigeria.
Sorry, I don't know if you've frozen. or it's my internet, but I can't hear you. Just while we're waiting for Ivan able to come back on, you know, such a passionate presentation. It really helps someone like me understand how climate change
experienced by everyone, especially people in use. The reason is because I'll use my community as an example. Therefore, they should stay at home.
Yeah, sorry, Ivan, you just broke up a little bit in the middle when you were speaking about drought. Do you just want to repeat that?
Okay, I said during this flood period, what happens in my community is that the girls are being withdrawn from school. They say to themselves that the girls cannot withstand the pressure of the flood. So therefore, they allow just the boys to go to school because they feel the boys are more stronger to withstand the pressure, not knowing, like I said from the beginning, that girls are barrier breakers. We are strong, but we are being deprived from going to school when there is flood.
Yeah. Thanks so much, I've been able for helping us connect how the effects of climate change actually impact girls and young women. You know, you talked about increases the rates of child marriage, it decreases the number of girls at school, it decreases economic opportunities for girls. You know, climate change has a harmful effect on everyone's life, but particularly the lives of girls and young women within your country and many others. Just to focus on, you know, moving into faith-based organizations and what can faith-based organizations, why is it our calling to pursue climate justice? And I'd love you to share a little bit for people about how has being part of Girls Brigade transformed your life as well?
Okay, thank you, Claire, for that question. Girls Brigade and every other faith-based organizations are influencers. But my emphasis today is going to be the Girls Brigade. See, you see, the Girls Brigade seeks the fact that we adhere to the mandate of God. Now, when God created the world, what he said was man should be in charge. He did not say man should be subordinate. He said man should be in charge, should be in control of every living creature that he had created, right? And that was why he had to put Adam in the Garden of Eden, because he knew how important the environment was, not just for himself, but how important it was to us. And that was why he had to put Adam in the Garden of Eden. Talking about gender justice, in the book of Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21, the Bible stated it clearly there. He said, be ye subject to one another for reference out of faith for Christ. He said, there is neither female or male. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. He said, for we are one in Christ Jesus. That is to say, even God knows himself that both boys and girls, men and women, we are one, we are equal. And so therefore, we should be treated equally. You see, if you give me options to join faith-based organization, I'm going to choose the Girls Brigade over and over again. Do you want to know why? It is because the Girls Brigade made me to have absolute faith in God. Now, in times of tribulation, the Girls Brigade made me to understand that I have to have faith in God, because it is God who is going to redeem me at the end of it all. The Girls Brigade also made me to understand that, of course, I should love God first. And I tell people, I am made of love. I give out love, this agape love. It is because of the Girls Brigade, because the Girls Brigade showed me love when I needed it the most. What about hope? I have hope in God. I know that someday my voice, the same way you're hearing it today, is going to be heard by so many people. What about leadership skills? I have leadership skills today just because of the Girls Brigade. And it will interest you to know that I lead in different capacities, not just in the Girls Brigade, but outside the Girls Brigade. Education aspects. The Girls Brigade has been supportive. When I was in school, they were there for me. So you see, that is why I said, I am going to choose the Girls Brigade over and over again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ivy. That's such a powerful testimony of what God has done in your life. And I'm just going to leave our discussion for people to really think about that. But thank you so much for your contribution. And thank you. I think everybody would join in to say that our Delegation of Hope, these incredible young women, have done such a great job today communicating you know, their experiences, and we're thankful. We know that they were sharing quite traumatic things, and we have been really mindful of the care of them as well within that, but they wanted to share their experiences with you because they believe that you and I can make a difference, that their stories can help challenge our individual actions, but also that their voices as young Christian women of island nations in particular, in nations that mainly are not contributing to climate change, that they deserve to be heard as well. And we also pray for power makers and for government officials as well, for intervention from government levels as well. So please join me in writing some encouragement to them. Now I'm going to introduce our next speaker, which is Priscilla Penny from Zimbabwe. She is the president of Girls Brigade International, but she also serves on the board of Fountain of Hope, which focuses on orphans and children in rural Zimbabwe. She's an active salvationist and has served in various advisory and leadership roles, and she's created the Days for Girls initiative, which is to mobilize sanitary products for girls and women. Priscilla, as president of Girls Brigade, I just would love to hear your thoughts from just hearing these really inspiring advocates speak.
Thank you so much, Claire. Sorry.
Yeah, you're echoing a little bit. I think you might have another computer on, but just while you sort out your sound, if Ruth Chakasta is on, can you change your name to Ruth Chakasta so I can make you a panelist? I'm having difficulties finding you. Or if you could raise your hand, that would be really helpful on the Zoom. So that would be great, Ruth. Priscilla. I'm sorry, you might put yourself on mute, Priscilla. Sorry, Priscilla, you're on mute. We can't hear you. There we go, Priscilla.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Claire, and thank you so much, ladies, for those powerful stories and powerful testimonies. You know, Girls Brigade is about girls, so I'm really grateful to have these young ladies speak up and their voices being heard by everybody. And they did well, Claire. They did well, and their stories are so powerful and transformative. And I'm sure they have challenged me. And I'm sure they've challenged a lot of us. I saw in the chat comments, there were a lot of comments that were coming up, cheering them on and valuing their contributions. So I'm really, really proud to be part of this organization for girls. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I know, Priscilla, as international president, you've been involved in some of the more high level preparations around USCSW. Girls Brigade was part of a faith-based alliance that submitted a written statement to the United Nations.
Sorry. I can't hear you. Let me just...
Great. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now, Priscilla? Can you hear me now? Hopefully you can. Technology is great when it works, isn't it, everybody? We all know. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. I wasn't hearing you, sorry.
Brilliant. No, I'm just saying I'm just making people aware that there was a written statement that Girls Brigade submitted in collaboration with other faith-based organizations. And what were some of the recommendations that faith-based organizations presented to the United Nations on the issue of climate justice?
Okay, there were I think about 9 or 10 recommendations, but because of time, I'll just mention 2 that I think are key. One was to recognize the unique position of churches and other faith-based organizations as reliable partners in addressing climate change. Why is that? Faith-based organizations and the church, we are deeply rooted in communities and we are a globally connected body. So obviously, because we are in the communities, we are on the ground, we are able to be effective. And faith alone may not protect communities from impacting climate change, but it brings hope, motivation to adapt and to build resilience. So it's very, very important for us to be able to help communities adjust where there've been devastation. You need people that can help with adapting to whatever situation or circumstances they are in. And then the second recommendation was empowering women in leadership roles. If marginalized communities and women are left out of key policy and decision-making spaces, their needs go unrecognized. So we need to empower our women in leadership so that they will be able to be effective. Also to enhance sustainable financing that supports community-led climate action and shift resources to the hands of women leaders so that they will be more effective. With resources, women can achieve more.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Priscilla. I'm so glad that Girls Brigade did submit that written statement to the UN Commission. You can find it on the website. And it's one way in which a faith-based organisation is trying to influence at that kind of United Nations high level. But we're delighted that there are GB leaders that are live on this webinar, and there are GB leaders that will be watching this on the recording when we put it on YouTube. As a GB leader who is passionate about promoting creation care, what are some of the ideas, what are some of the practical things that GB leaders can do within their programme?
Well, GB can do a lot. Reduce, reuse, recycle. You can have, as a GB group, you start from home. Charity begins at home. So in your small groups, whether it's at church or it's at school, you can have recycle bins actually labeled Girls Brigade recycle bins. This is for recycling, this is for rubbish, this is for whatever. Having bins at your workplace. Clean up your surroundings. No plastic or cans or paper should be lying around, whether it's at church, it's at school. Girls Brigade should be on the forefront of picking up a trash and putting them in the correct position. And the other thing I talked about, reduce, reuse, recycle. Recycle the plastics. We have shopping bags. You can create shopping bags. I think you see these are created by fruit boxes and milk boxes, shopping bags. So you would have reused and saved the planet. And the other thing the Girls Brigade can do is, as leaders, we need to include programs to groom girls. In our programming, we need to include programs that teach the girls to be stewards, and by encouraging recycling, learning about climate change, they need to know what it does. Because some of the girls live in places where they have no idea what a hurricane is. They just see it on the news, but they don't experience it. But as the girls were saying, those who contribute much to climate change, cause they are the ones they are not the ones who are heavily affected. So we need to teach our girls about climate change, be up to speed with what is happening in the world, develop disaster management and renewable energy, advocate for health corner for girls and women, where girls and women can shelter without being abused in areas where it is prone to have bad effects of climate change. Another simple thing is beat plastic pollution. You know, Girls Brigade has membership of over plus or minus 120,000 around the world. Imagine if all 120,000 stop using plastic bottles, drink water, have their own personalized plastic bottles. It means in 1 hour, if 120 of our membership buy a bottle of water, we have bought 120,000 bottles. But if we reuse those bottles, we are using less plastic. So that's something that is very, very simple. Let's learn and promote cleanliness and promote, have an eye that doesn't want to see anything on the floor. Yeah. No rubbish, no plastic, no paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Priscilla. I love the bags, and it reminds me of so many great GB projects. Piggy One Village Works in Cambodia, where I visited the factory as well, where they recycle material and make them into wallets and bags and lots of beautiful items. So thank you so much, Priscilla. I'm really delighted. We've got our last two panelists just to give us an overview of what you've heard today and just connect it to theology and gender justice. I'm really delighted to introduce the Reverend Dr. Rachel Mash, who is the environmental coordinator of the Anglican Church of South Africa. So that is South Africa, Lesotho, Namibia, and Eswatini. And she works with the Green Anglicans movement, which is spread to 14 countries across Africa. And she's the secretary to the Anglican Communion Environmental Network. And we also have Ruth Chikasa from Zambia. She is a past president of Girls Brigade International, but she is now currently serving as our ambassadorial patron for GBI, and she works in development programs focusing on community health in Zambia and across Africa, and she's a tremendous community mobilizer for social change and governance issues as well. So it's great to have both Rachel and Ruth. Ruth, do you want to turn on your camera as well? I think you should be able to, as I promoted you as a panelist. And Rachel, my apologies that your name was spelt wrong in the PowerPoint slides, so thank you for your understanding. But if I turn to you first, Rachel, as part of the delegation of the Anglican Communion at CSW 66, what have you heard today from these young women? What are some of the things that you've picked up from what they've shared?
Thank you so much, Claire. I found this afternoon incredibly inspiring. To think that we have young women of faith who are able to connect the challenges of climate justice with their faith, but then also with practical action, and to see people from around such a broad breadth of different places on the globe. And I think the thing that really struck me this afternoon was the whole issue of climate justice. Because if you think in just one lifetime, we have really destroyed this planet. And for no fault of their own, these young women are suffering the effects of hurricanes, of droughts, of sea level rise. And I think the verse that has been just going through and through my mind is Jeremiah 2 verse 7, which said, I brought you into a rich and fertile land, to eat the fruit and rich produce, but you came, you defiled my land, and you made my inheritance an abomination. And it's the issue of intergenerational injustice that we, as the older generation, are leaving such a destroyed and devastated land to young people, and that we must stand up, we must act. It is no longer a should we, it is a must, and it has to be top priority for our faith communities, for our educational institutions, for our governments. This has to be our number one priority moving forward.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rachel. From that perspective, when we look at it, we've got many generations on this Zoom call, you know, and actually what is the legacy that we're passing on to the next generation? You've really challenged us about that. And Ruth is somebody that has been involved in Girls Brigade, but is also involved in lots of other rural community initiatives. What are some of your thoughts from what you've heard today from our panel? Sorry, Ruth, you're on mute. Sorry, you're on mute.
I was just saying, first, I want to say thank you to the young girls that have spoken. These young women have so inspired us. I am a proud GB leader to have seen that our girls are moving forward and they know what they want. You know, climate change is something that has brought a lot of suffering to a lot of people. When I was listening to Dange speaking about what is happening in Papua New Guinea, it made me feel so touched. And as the ladies from the Caribbean were taking us through what was happening with the hurricanes, it's so devastating for the young life to stay for so long without communicating with your family, not knowing whether they are there or they are not there. But one thing that I want to say is climate change is real. For those of us who live in Africa, and Zambia is in the belly of Africa, we don't have a sea, we are landlocked, but we call ourselves land-linked. the first time that we have come across this was this rainy season. Storm Anna just came and swept through our country, you know, and the devastation that was in this country, in a lot of areas, especially in the urban setups, you know, it was there in the rural areas, but in the urban setup where there is clogging of drainages, there was so much flooding, houses were swept away, and it gave us a glimpse of what our friends go through. Climate change is something that we really need to do something about as Girls Brigade. I like the scripture that Rachel shared with us. I have my own in Deuteronomy 20 and verse 19. You know, God instructs the children of Israel that when you go to war, please don't cut trees. Trees have not offended you. You know, he's such a humorous God. He said, trees have not offended you. Every tree you find there, you eat of its fruit. Do not cut them. But we find ourselves in a world where indiscriminate cutting of trees is the order of the day, especially in Africa, where we have these trees like the mukula trees that some of these countries want for their medicine and for wood. That is rampaging this country. It is something that we really need to speak about.
And Ruth, just to follow on, you know, Dangi and Ivan Ebo spoke really passionately about how they could identify how climate change impacts the lives of girls and women uniquely. And I'd love to hear your perspective as somebody that's worked in so many different community projects and who's from Zambia. You know, how do you see how climate justice and gender justice intersect? Like, how are they related?
Claire and everybody, you know, climate change is seen in so many ways. When you have a drought in a country like Zambia or in anywhere in Africa, it means that the girls have added responsibility to be able to do so many things. You know, it means the women who walk long distances, especially in rural areas. They walk long distances to try and get firewood because that is the fuel that they use for cooking. They walk long distances to draw water. It means if your mother is going to draw water, you as a girl in the home, you cannot just stay there. You cannot read your books. You have to follow your mother. 90% of society issues, developmental issues, are borne by women in Africa. A lot of work that is done on development is for women, and yet they are refused a seat on the discussion table where these issues are being discussed. You see, for a girl, when she's on her menses, she needs a lot of water. And if she has to walk about 3 kilometers to draw water, that affects her. The way she looks after herself when she's menstruating, you know. And if she comes home from school, she has walked about 2 or 3 kilometers to come back home. This is in the rural area. You know, for those of us who live in urban setups, we don't see these challenges. But for those girls who live in the rural areas, they walk to school and they walk back. That's 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers going and 3 kilometers coming back, and you're on your menses. When you come back, you find there's no water. You have to walk again to go and draw water for you, not only for you, but for your family, to be able to help with the family, then draw water for yourself. You are the last person to have a bath in your family because you have to make sure everything is done. So the injustice that is there for the women and for our girls is very, very strong. And I think these are some of the things that we need to start looking at as women of faith, that our girls and what we have gone through, our girls should not go through. It is very, very important that we look in these issues.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As you were speaking, I was also just being aware of the fact that if girls have to walk those long kilometers, they're also at risk of violence.
Yes.
And so it's just, you know, adds up. And Rachel, I had the privilege of reading one of the articles that you wrote for an Anglican magazine where you really do talk about how climate justice and gender justice intersects. Would you like to add on to what Ruth said and, you know, share a few more points?
Yeah, I think what I'd also like to talk about is the climate-related disasters that we've heard quite a lot about this afternoon. And a lot of the studies are showing that women are much more impacted by climate-related disasters. And this is for many reasons. So say, for instance, maybe there's a tsunami or a hurricane coming. The men typically would be working, so they might be in a solid building. They would have access to telephones or cell phones where they are to say, you need to get out of where you are. The women typically would be at home. They would be looking after the babies or maybe looking after the sick relatives. They can't run. They have to carry people with them. And then there are cultural norms. For instance, girls aren't supposed to be running around kicking soccer balls and climbing trees. So often they're not as fit as the boys. The clothes that we wear, girls are not allowed to wear shorts or pants. So if it comes to they're trying to run away from a flood, they've got long skirts that tangle them. They generally aren't allowed to learn how to swim because they're not supposed to show their bodies. So a lot of the cultural things around sports, around the jobs that women have, and around access to communications really put them at risk when there are such disasters.
It's
and
true.
As we've heard so strongly, in terms of the going and finding water, the other issue that also happens is you find when the young women who are coming from the rural areas, they get their first job. So they send home money for food to the rural areas. Now what happens when there's a drought? The family in the rural area don't have enough money. So they look to the young girl who's in the city and say, we need more money, we need more food, we're not coping. We paid for your education, you must help us now. So it puts her at huge risk of maybe getting involved with what we call a sugar daddy, a man who will provide for those needs for her because she has no other resort. And two, when the food is costing more money because of drought, or you have to buy water because the water is polluted, the husband or partner will come home and say, why do I have no meat on my plate? I'm giving you the same amount of money that I gave you every month, and now there's no good food on my plate. And then he can become angry, and she can become a victim of violence because she is trying to feed the family from a lot less money because of the impacts of climate change.
Yeah, thanks Rachel and Ruth for your insights, and forgive me, we're just running out of time, but I just would love to slightly end on a different note than maybe what we've discussed previously. And I just would love, with your expertise and your professionalism and your insight, what should we as Christians, as faith-based organizations, how should we be advocating to bodies like the United Nations or to our own local government? How best can we affect change at governmental level that needs to happen? Not open to anybody that wants to go first.
Okay, can I jump in there? I think one of the important things that we need to remember is about how politicians work. I always remember a comment that was made from a pastor who lives in Washington, D.C. And he said, the politicians, because they are the guys who are walking around with a wet finger, and they put their wet finger in the air to say, which way is the wind blowing? And I'm going to change whichever the wind blows. And our role as people of faith is to change the wind. So the politicians will say, my people, my constituency, my country, the voters are wanting green energy. The voters are wanting us to give some of our budget in loss and damage to pay back for the damage that we have done in countries like the British Virgin Islands or Mozambique. So our job is to change the wind.
Yeah, I love that, Rachel. And Ruth is somebody that has been involved in lots of community activism in Zambia and a lot of different issues. What would you tell us, that the people that want to change the wind?
I like that analogy of changing the wind, but I also want to say that we are the salt of the earth. And as faith organizations, we need to be very, very mindful that we have this role that God has given us. The church, the minister on Sunday doesn't go out calling people to come to church. He is there, especially in Africa. They'll come anyway, they'll fill up the pews, and he has an opportunity for 2 hours to speak to them about what is important in that country. Whereas a politician will need to go and make adverts and invite people. But for us as a church and faith-based organization, people come to us. And it is how we use that time that we are with those people. It is how we use the time with our girls to advocate. But as leaders in organizations such as ours, we need to call out the politicians on what is prevailing on the ground. We need to give them information on how we feel. Like Rachel said, where is the wind blowing? This is the climate change time. This is the climate change time. This is a time to begin to talk about the effects that our young girls are being impacted because of what is happening in the world. This is the time to seek the ministers. This is the time to seek the civic leaders. This is the time that we need to invest more resources in climate change, even from a perspective of Girls Brigade, that our teaching program should change and begin to talk about topical issues such as climate change and how it affects our girls. Sometimes people think it's just the wind that blows. They blow off the roofs and there's too much water, there's flooding. But how does that impact our girls? Because that girl, where is she going to get clean water? That girl, where is she going to get people to sponsor her to school? That girl, how is she going to deal with, like Rachel says, sending money home and all those, because it brings about prostitution, it brings about a lot of vices that we are speaking about as a church. So prevention is better than cure. We begin to engage our, community mobilization needs strong women. And I feel Girls Brigade has very, very strong women across the world. We had a walkathon one year, and how that impacted all of us. We could have a day specifically set aside for Girls Brigade, for the women to go to their civic leaders, to go to their MPs, to go to the, and just begin to bring these issues to the fore. And I'm sure we'll have a great impact.
Thank you so much, Ruth, and thank you so much, Rachel, for joining us and for really challenging us, particularly, thinking about our actions, how we advocate for change in our daily life, but also at government level. I know that everyone will also want to thank our Girls Brigade Delegation of Hope, who have been absolutely tremendous at sharing their own perspective and their wisdom. And one thing that we wanted to do within this session was to inform people, to amplify voices that are often missing from the conversation, mainly young women from smaller nations, but also we wanted to raise hope. And I really hope that you're leaving this session feeling hope-filled about the potential, of the incredible potential of these young women that you've heard today, and they're making a difference right now in many different leadership positions, and also hope that we have a role to play individually, but as Girls Brigade, and also within